Seldom does a year go by where the 24-hour of Le Mans didn't have some sort of story attached to it, like how the Whittington brothers came from nowhere to beat the prototypes in '79, or how the Toyota team failed on the last lap of the race in 2016, relinquishing the victory to Porsche. But to be honest, neither of those stories have quite the same uniqueness about them, as did the race of '53. And it wasn't because of the records broken or that the eventual winners were kicked out of the race before the start of it, only to be let back in again. Instead, the tale is with the two drivers that took that broken Jag to victory. Before the infamous Ford versus Ferrari rivalry at Le Mans, there was Jaguar versus Ferrari, or indeed Jaguar versus pretty much anybody else, because for Jaguar, Le Mans meant everything, and the man assigned to spearhead this campaign was Lofty England, Jaguar's team manager and professional arsehole. This was a man who stood by the ideology that the interests of Jaguar were much more important than that of the expendable slab of meat steering their cars around the circuits. Sounds like a lovely guy, doesn't he? But anyway, the Jaguar team boasted an all-star British lineup of drivers to scythe through the pack come race day. There was Sterling Moss and Peter Walker in car number 17, Tony Rolt and Duncan Hamilton in car number 18, and Peter Whitehead and Ian Stewart in car number 19. Our drivers of interest here are Rolt and Hamilton. These two were nigh inseparable as co-pilots. Hamilton in particular was a man of much character. After surviving the war, he decided to take up car racing and developed a habit of getting himself into some rather unusual circumstances when in the car. In 1949, whilst heading to the Brighton speed trials, Hamilton noticed a Bugatti ranging up behind him. Being a gentleman, Hamilton moved over and waved it past, but the Bugatti hung back. That was until the descent down the hill, when the Bugatti began to draw alongside. Curious to see who was in it, Hamilton looked across. To his horror, there was nobody in it. And then that's when he realised. It was his own car, and he had forgotten that he was towing it. Naturally, this didn't really end too well for the Bugatti. Another remarkable story occurred at the 1953 Portuguese Grand Prix, which was held the week after the Le Mans race. After leading into the first corner, Hamilton crashed heavily into an electricity pylon. His car cartwheeled through the air and threw him into a tree. After hanging around for a minute, Hamilton fell back down to earth, only just getting his foot out of the way of a passing Ferrari. After being taken to a hospital for an emergency procedure, and asking why an anaesthetic was not extended to him, he was told the crash had taken out the entire power supply of Porto, and sent that region back into the Stone Age. And of course, whilst being a case of unofficial history, his tale of what would have happened at Le Mans is par for the course for the man. Although in years gone by it was dismissed by both Rolt and Lofty as being a story of fiction, but really, would you admit to your drivers being Whatever the case, come 4 PM on the 14th of June 1953, they would both go on to create history as well as an incredible story. Friday practice and the Jags are demonstrating their pace, and all three of the works cars go below the record time. Though Sterling Moss in the number 17 Jag wanted to try a lower back axle ratio, therefore the spare car for Jaguar was prepped and sent out for testing. Problem was that the spare car had the same number that Rolt and Hamilton had. This ran afoul of the rules, and Ferrari cried foul. Rolt and Hamilton were subsequently kicked out of the race. Lofty tried to beg and plead with the ACO that this was merely a simple mistake, and that there was no effort to cheat, but they would not hear back from them until a few hours before the race. The appeal was upheld, Sir William Lyons, the Jaguar chairman, paid off the 25,000 franc fine, and the Rolt Hamilton entry was back on the grid. The only thing was, the drivers weren't at the circuit. So where were they? I'm not sure how, but they managed to find the pair outside a restaurant called Gruber's, sculling down coffee to help nurse their catastrophic hangovers from the previous night. For you see, after being disqualified, they were skeptical that such an appeal would ever be upheld. They therefore went on the bender and treated it as though it was just a holiday in France. But now it was morning. In Le Mans, on race day, Hamilton asked Lyons the ever-important question.
Is there a Turkish bathhouse in this town? Mate, you need to drive.
Now at this point, I will say don't drink and drive. If you do that, you're an asshole. But this was 1953, so what can we do other than just talk about it? Lofty was faced with the reality that both of their drivers had rocked up just about as pissed as Kimmy at the gala. Neither of these two wanted to drive. They wanted that Turkish bathhouse, among other things, but they were required to race and they had to be prepared. Black coffee was the order of the day, but even at 4 PM, they were still destroyed. Neither of them wanted to drive, so a coin toss was improvised. dick. Rolt started the race and was in 7th by the end of the first lap, behind the Ferraris and Sterling Moss and the other Jaguar. After a few more laps, he had climbed up to 4th. The Jaguar team had also gotten their revenge on the Ferrari outfit when they spotted the number 14 Ferrari illegally having its brake system filled up. As a result, that car was disqualified from the race, leaving one less Ferrari for the Brits to run through. As the sun dipped below the horizon, it was the Rolt-Hamilton combo that was leading the race. Rolt was bettering his times by 5 seconds to push for the lead. After the Moss Jag was let down by a misfire, as well as fuel supply issues, it was starting to become a race between the 18 Jag of Rolt and Hamilton and the 12 Ferrari of Alberto Ascari and Luigi Vallorisi. The battle went on throughout the night, with the lead changing hands constantly. The Jag being good in the corners and under brakes, but losing time to the V12 Ferrari down the straights. Before daybreak, the Rolt-Hamilton Jag was now a full lap ahead of the Ferrari, asserting its dominance over the field and going for likely victory. Meanwhile, Hamilton was refusing the coffee being offered at the pit stops, claiming it made his arms twitch whilst driving. So he asked for the one beverage that would drown out the hangover without the jitters. Brandy. By 9 AM, the racing gods had struck down upon Ferrari with clutch failure. With the closest car behind being Moss, who was setting the track alight but was still several laps down, victory was certain for the number 18 Jag. 4 PM came by, and across the line first was the number 18 car of Rolt and Hamilton, with the windscreen broken and all. Oh yeah, that broken windscreen? So at some point during the race, Hamilton had been struck in the face by a bird. It broke through the windscreen and his nose at 130 miles an hour. But with his system laced with alcohol, I'm guessing he thought nothing of it. Either that or this guy's the toughest motherfucker since Buck Shelford. And so after 48 hours of no sleep, triumph and alcohol, the pair celebrated their victory in much the same way that they did the night earlier.